The photograph landed on Dr. Park Jin-woo's desk with the weight of a guillotine blade. "You have 48 hours to end this relationship, or we release these to every major news outlet in Korea," said Director Choi, his fingers drumming against the mahogany surface. "Your choice, Jin-woo. Your career or this, woman." Jin-woo stared at the images, him and Amara kissing outside her apartment, holding hands at Houndy Beach, her head on his shoulder at a cafe in Gwangali. Private moments weaponized into ammunition. His jaw tightened as he looked up at the hospital's board of directors, 5 men in expensive suits who'd built their reputations on tradition and conservative values. "Her name is Amara King," Jin-woo said quietly. "And she's one of the finest nurses this hospital has ever employed." Director Choi's face reddened. "She's a foreigner who's corrupting our institution's reputation. We've received complaints from patients' families. The staff is uncomfortable. This is Korea, not some liberal Western country where these things are acceptable." Jin-woo stood, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow across the boardroom table. "These things? You mean love? You mean 2 medical professionals who happen to care about each other?" "Sit down, Dr. Park," another board member interjected. "Your father was a respected surgeon at this hospital for 30 years. Don't destroy his legacy over this infatuation." The mention of his father hit like a physical blow. Jin-woo had spent his entire life living up to Park Sung-min's shadow, top of his class at Seoul National University, youngest chief of cardiology at Busan University Hospital, published in international journals. And now, at 34, he was being told his professional accomplishments meant nothing compared to who he loved. "My father taught me that medicine is about saving lives, not politics," Jin-woo said. "I won't end my relationship with Amara." Director Choi stood, gathering the photographs. "Then you leave us no choice. We'll reconvene in 2 days. Use that time wisely." Amara was waiting in the hospital parking garage when Jin-woo finally emerged 3 hours later. One look at his face told her everything. "They know," she said, not a question but a statement. He nodded, pulling her into his arms despite the security cameras he knew were watching. "Someone's been following us. Taking pictures." She'd known this day would come. From the moment their relationship had shifted from professional to personal 8 months ago, she'd felt the weight of 1,000 eyes judging them. The whispers in the hallway when she passed. The way Korean staff members suddenly had urgent tasks elsewhere when she entered the break room. The patients who requested different nurses when they saw her dark skin. "What did they say?" Amara asked, though she already knew. "They want me to choose. Them or you." Jin-woo's voice cracked slightly. 48 hours. Amara pulled back, looking up at the man who'd somehow broken through every defense she'd built since moving to Korea 4 years ago. She'd come to Busan chasing a dream, international nursing experience, a chance to send money back to her family in Yeondae adventure. She'd found all that and more. She'd also found isolation, discrimination, and a loneliness that had felt like drowning until Jin-woo had seen her. Really seen her. Not as the African nurse or the foreigner, but as Amara. "We both know what you have to do," she said, her Cameroonian accent thickening with emotion as it always did when she was upset. "Your career, Jin-woo. Everything you've worked for." "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't you dare tell me to leave you. Be realistic." Her voice rose, echoing in the concrete structure. "You're one of the best cardiologists in South Korea. You save lives. I'm a nurse who can find work anywhere. The math is simple." "The math," Jin-woo repeated bitterly. "Is that what we are?" An equation to be solved. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. Then again. And again. His face paled as he scrolled through the messages. "What is it?" Amara asked, though the dread in her stomach already knew. "They didn't wait 48 hours, Jin-woo said, his voice hollow. "The photos are already online." By morning, they were everywhere. Naver, Dom, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. The headlines varied in their cruelty, but shared the same theme. Top doctor's scandalous affair with African nurse. Hospital romance crosses racial lines. Park Jin-woo's fall from grace. Some articles tried for journalistic neutrality, but the comment sections revealed the true sentiment. Disgusting. He's betraying Korean women. What's wrong with Korean women that he has to go to Africa? She probably seduced him for money and a visa. This is what happens when we let too many foreigners into our country. Mixed-race relationships dilute our pure bloodline. He should be ashamed. His ancestors are weeping. Amara sat in her tiny studio apartment in Yonj district, scrolling through the comments on her phone even though each one felt like a blade slicing her skin. Her hands trembled as she read them, tears streaming down her face. She'd experienced racism before, the ajamas who clutched their purses tighter when she passed, the taxi drivers who sometimes refused to stop, the casual assumptions that she was a factory worker or English teacher rather than a medical professional. But this was different. This was targeted, violent, personal. Her phone rang. Her mother calling from Cameroon. Amara, what is happening? Your cousin sent me articles. Korean articles with your picture. Her mother's voice was panicked, speaking rapid French. You said you were just working there. You never mentioned a man. Mama, I can explain. Explain what? That you're destroying your reputation? That you're with a man in a country that clearly doesn't want you there? Come home, Amara. Come home right now. I can't just leave. You can and you will. I didn't raise you to be someone's scandal. Do you know what people are saying here? Your father's friends have seen these articles. They're sharing them in WhatsApp groups. The whole community knows. Amara closed her eyes. She'd forgotten that shame traveled faster than light in the age of social media. In Yaoundé, she'd been the pride of her neighborhood, the girl who'd graduated top of her nursing class, who'd secured an international position, who sent money home every month. Now she was the girl who'd fallen for an Asian man and caused an international incident. Mama, I love him, Amara said quietly. There was a long silence. Then, love doesn't pay bills when you lose your job. Love doesn't erase shame. Love doesn't protect you from people who hate you for existing. The call ended. Amara stared at her reflection in the darkened phone screen, barely recognizing the woman looking back. She'd been so careful for 4 years. Worked twice as hard to prove herself. Learned Korean until she could speak it fluently. Bowed deeper, smiled wider, made herself smaller and quieter and less threatening. And for what? One relationship, one chance at happiness, and everything she'd built was crumbling. A knock at her door made her jump. She checked the peephole and found Jinwoo standing there, baseball cap pulled low, mask covering his face. You shouldn't be here, she said through the door. What if someone sees? I don't care anymore, he said. Let me in. She opened the door and he stepped inside quickly, removing his disguise. His eyes were bloodshot, his usually impeccable hair disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept. The hospital called, he said without preamble. Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. Both of us. Amara's heart sank. They're going to fire us. Probably. But there's something else. He pulled out his phone, showing her another article. This one was from a medical ethics board. Someone filed a formal complaint claiming we violated patient confidentiality and professional boundaries. They're saying we used our positions to pursue a relationship, that it's unethical. But that's not true. Amara protested. We kept everything completely separate from work. We never even spoke about our relationship at the hospital. The truth doesn't matter when everyone's already decided you're guilty, Jinwoo said bitterly. He sank onto her small couch, head in his hands. My parents called. My mother was crying. My father hasn't spoken a word to me. My sister said the extended family is humiliated. Her children are being teased at school because their uncle is in a scandal. Amara sat beside him, taking his hand. Maybe we should. If you say we should break up, I'm going to lose my mind, Jinwoo interrupted. Everyone wants us to end this. Everyone thinks it's the simple solution. But I'm not giving up on you. I'm not going to let them win. What if there's no winning? Amara asked softly. What if we fight and still lose everything? Jinwoo turned to face her, his dark eyes intense. Then we lose everything together. But at least we'll have each other. It should have been romantic. Instead, it felt like a death sentence. The board meeting was a massacre. They sat across from 7 stern faces in the hospital's main conference room. Director Choi led the proceedings with clinical efficiency. Dr. Park Jin-woo, Nurse Amaran Kang, you are here today to address serious allegations regarding professional misconduct and violation of hospital policy. Specifically, that you engaged in a romantic relationship while working together, which constitutes a conflict of interest and breach of professional ethics. Jin-woo's lawyer, a sharp woman named Lee Mi-sun whom he'd hired the day before, leaned forward. My client contests these allegations. Dr. Park and Ms. Kang never worked directly together on patient care. Ms. Kang works in the pediatric unit while Dr. Park is in cardiology. They are in completely different departments with no supervisory relationship. Director Choi smiled thinly. The hospital is not just separate departments, Ms. Lee. We are one institution. Their relationship affects the entire workplace environment. How? Amara spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. How does who I love in my personal time affect my ability to care for patients? One of the board members, Dr. Kong, cleared his throat. Ms. Kang, you must understand the optics. We've had multiple complaints from patients' families who are uncomfortable with your presence. Because I'm Black, Amara said flatly. Because you're involved in a scandal that reflects poorly on this institution, Dr. Kong corrected, though his discomfort was obvious. A scandal you created, Jin-woo interjected. We were private. Discreet. You're the ones who leaked those photos to the media. That's a serious accusation, Dr. Park, Director Choi said coldly. Is it? Those photos were taken by someone with hospital parking access. Someone who knew our schedules. Someone who wanted to force our hand. Jin-woo stood, his voice rising. You couldn't fire us outright because we're good at our jobs. So you manufactured a scandal. The room erupted in protests, but Attorney Lee raised her hand. Regardless of how this became public, the fact remains that my clients have violated no hospital policies. Their relationship is consensual, conducted entirely outside of work hours, and has no bearing on their professional performance. Director Choi pulled out a thick folder. As to that, we've conducted an internal review. We found several instances of unprofessional behavior. Amara's blood ran cold as he began reading from reports. A patient claimed she'd been distracted during a shift. Another nurse reported seeing them eating lunch together in the cafeteria. Someone said Jin-woo had smiled at Amara in the hallway. This is ridiculous, Jin-woo said. Eating lunch is now unprofessional? Smiling in a hallway. When it creates a hostile work environment for others, yes, Dr. Kong said. Who is it hostile to? Amara demanded. The patients I've cared for? I have the highest satisfaction ratings in pediatrics. The families who request me specifically because their children respond well to me. We have documentation, Director Choi said, sliding papers across the table. Attorney Lee scanned them, her expression darkening. These are anonymous complaints. Undated. No specific incidents. This wouldn't hold up in any legal proceeding. This isn't a legal proceeding, Director Choi said smoothly. This is an internal matter. And the board has made its decision. Jin-woo and Amara locked eyes. They both knew what was coming. Dr. Park Jin-woo, your contract is hereby terminated effective immediately, with cause. Nurse Amaran Kang, same. You will have 2 hours to collect your personal belongings from hospital premises, escorted by security. Any hospital property in your possession must be returned. You are not to contact current hospital staff or patients. Violation of these terms will result in legal action. You can't do this, Jin-woo said, but even he knew they could. Furthermore, Director Choi continued, we are reporting this incident to the Korean Medical Association and the Korean Nursing Association. They will conduct their own investigations into whether your medical licenses should be suspended or revoked. The room spun. Amara gripped the edge of the table. Losing their jobs was one thing. Losing their licenses meant losing their careers. Their identities. Everything they'd spent years building. Attorney Lee was talking, arguing, citing employment law and wrongful termination, but Amara could barely hear her over the ringing in her ears. She looked at Jin-woo and saw her own devastation reflected in his face. They were being destroyed. Not for incompetence. Not for harming patients. But for loving each other. The next 3 weeks were a blur of humiliation. Security escorted them through the hospital as they packed their lockers. Staff members they'd worked with for years avoided eye contact. A few brave souls whispered apologies, but most stayed silent, afraid of guilt by association. Jinwoo's office was the hardest. Diplomas on the wall. Medical journals he'd published. Thank you cards from patients whose lives he'd saved. All of it packed into cardboard boxes carried out past staring eyes and raised phone cameras. Amara's locker in the pediatrics wing was simpler, extra scrubs, some snacks, photos of her family. But when little Minjun, a 4-year-old patient she'd been caring for, saw her leaving and started crying for Nurse Amara, she almost broke. The child's mother quickly pulled him away, not meeting Amara's eyes. The media was waiting outside. Cameras flashing. Microphones thrust forward. Questions shouted in Korean and English. Dr. Park, do you regret your relationship? Nurse King, are you returning to Africa? Is it true you're suing the hospital? Did you really compromise patient care? Security pushed through the crowd to their cars. Jinwoo grabbed Amara's hand, holding tight as they ran the gauntlet together. That night, he came to her apartment with 2 bottles of soju and a look of grim determination. The Medical Association investigation starts next week, he said, pouring them both shots. My lawyer says it could take months. Mine says I'll probably lose my license, Amara said quietly. The Korean Nursing Association has a clause about bringing the profession into disrepute. Our relationship apparently qualifies. They drank in silence for a moment. I have savings, Jinwoo said. Enough for both of us for maybe 6 months if we're careful. I can't let you do that. You don't have a choice. We're in this together. He reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. I've been thinking, if we can't practice medicine here, maybe we can elsewhere. Singapore, maybe. Or Thailand. Somewhere that doesn't care about who we love. Amara wanted to believe it was possible, but exhaustion weighed on her. Jinwoo, be realistic. I can't practice anywhere without references from my previous employer. And Busan University Hospital isn't exactly going to give me a glowing recommendation. Then we'll find something else. We're smart. Educated. We'll figure it out. But as the weeks wore on, figuring it out became impossible. The Medical Association hearings were brutal. Jinwoo was questioned for hours about his relationship, his professionalism, his judgment. They brought in staff members who testified about seeing him distracted. Director Choi himself appeared to describe the toxic environment their relationship had created. Amara's hearing was shorter, but no less devastating. A panel of Korean nurses grilled her about why she'd pursued a relationship with a Korean doctor. Was it for money? Status? A visa? Her protests that it was simply love were met with skepticism. You must understand how this looks, one panel member said. A foreign nurse and a Korean doctor. The power imbalance alone raises serious ethical questions. There was no power imbalance. Amara insisted. We were equals. He never supervised me. He never had any authority over my career. Until your relationship destroyed both your careers, another member pointed out. Amara had no answer for that. The verdicts came down on the same day, 3 months after they'd been fired. Dr. Park Jinwoo, medical license suspended for 2 years pending ethical review. Nurse Amara Kang, nursing license revoked permanently. Jinwoo's suspension was harsh, but survivable. 2 years, and he could potentially practice again. But Amara's revocation was final. Her career in nursing was over. She received the news alone in her apartment, having skipped the official hearing because she couldn't bear to face more judgment. When Jinwoo arrived an hour later, she was sitting on her floor surrounded by her nursing textbooks, the ones she'd studied so hard, the ones that were now just expensive reminders of everything she'd lost. I'm sorry, Jinwoo said, and she saw he was crying. This is my fault. If we'd been more careful, we'd have been hiding forever, Amara interrupted. This isn't about us being careless. This is about them hating us for existing together. What do we do now? Amara looked around her tiny apartment, at her few possessions, at the life she'd built that was now in ruins. I don't know. For the first time since they'd met, she truly didn't know if love was enough. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under Amara's door like a snake. 60 days to vacate. The landlord had seen the news. Her apartment building's reputation was being affected. Other tenants had complained. She had to leave. Jinwoo was luckier his family owned his apartment. But his parents had cut him off financially. His bank accounts, previously padded by his salary and family money, were now frozen by his father. His credit cards canceled. His car, a gift for finishing medical school, repossessed because it was technically still in his father's name. They sat in a cheap gymjalbang in Siamayan, one of the few places where nobody recognized them, trying to count their remaining resources. I have about 8 million won left, Jinwoo said, doing mental math. Maybe 2 months of living expenses if we're extremely careful. Amara converted the numbers in her head. Roughly 7,000 US. I have 3 million won. My savings. I was sending money home every month, but I stopped when. She trailed off. They both knew when. When their world collapsed. So we have 11 million won total. For months if we live like students. Jinwoo laughed bitterly. I haven't lived like a student since I was in university. I was making 40 million won a year. Now I can't even buy dinner without calculating the cost. Amara reached across the table, squeezing his hand. We'll find jobs. I can teach English. You could tutor pre-med students. But even those options proved difficult. The scandal had made them toxic. Language schools rejected Amara's applications the moment they Googled her name. Parents refused to let Jinwoo tutor their children, afraid his moral corruption would somehow infect them. They applied for positions at convenience stores, coffee shops, restaurants. Anything that paid. But their overqualifications combined with their notoriety made them unemployable. Who wanted to hire the famous, scandalous interracial couple? Who wanted cameras and reporters hanging around their business? Jinwoo's friend Hyunwoo offered them both jobs at his small graphic design company, but after 2 days, clients started threatening to pull their contracts if those people kept working there. Hyunwoo apologized profusely as he let them go. I'm sorry, he said, unable to meet their eyes. I have employees to think about. Rent to pay. I can't lose clients. They understood. Everyone had to protect themselves. Nobody could afford to be collateral damage in their scandal. By month 5, they'd moved to a gashwon in a run-down part of Yeonju, a tiny room barely large enough for a bed, shared bathroom down the hall, no kitchen. It cost 350,000 won a month, less than Jinwoo used to spend on coffee. Amara got a job cleaning offices at night, cash under the table, no questions asked. She worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans in buildings where she'd once been respected. Her back ached. Her hands grew rough and cracked from chemicals. She came home as Jinwoo was waking up. Jinwoo found work at a PC Bang, a gaming cafe, running the overnight shift. He served ramen to teenagers and fixed computer problems, making minimum wage. Sometimes the customers recognized him. Most just stared. A few took photos. They were living a nightmare that seemed to have no end. One night, Amara came home to find Jinwoo staring at his laptop, his face illuminated by the screen's glow in their dark room. What are you looking at? She asked, too tired to care but asking anyway. Job postings. In other countries. Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, anywhere that might hire us. He scrolled through pages of listings. But they all require references from previous employers. And when they call Busan University Hospital, he didn't need to finish. They both knew what the hospital would say. Amara sat beside him on their tiny bed. Their lives had shrunk to this: one room, one bed, one laptop, diminishing hope. We can't live like this, she said quietly. This isn't living. This is just surviving. What's the alternative? Jinwoo asked, his voice hollow. Give up? Admit they were right? That we shouldn't have been together. No, Amara said quickly. Never that. But maybe we need to stop trying to get back what we lost. Maybe that life is gone and we need to accept it. And do what? Amara didn't have an answer. So they sat in silence, two highly educated professionals reduced to poverty because they'd fallen in love. The turning point came from an unexpected place. Jinwoo's younger sister, Park Min-ji, showed up at their gashwon one evening. She'd been radio silent since the scandal broke, loyal to their parents' demands to cut Jinwoo off. But now she stood in the narrow hallway, designer purse over her shoulder, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" she asked. Their room was so small that all three of them could barely fit. Minji perched on the edge of the bed while Jinwoo and Amara stood. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," Minji said immediately. "Neither does Dad. They'd kill me if they found out." "Then why are you here?" Jinwoo asked, his voice careful. Minji pulled out her phone, scrolling to a news article. "Because I found this." The headline made Amara's stomach drop. Busan Hospital faces lawsuit from former foreign nurses over discrimination. Jinwoo grabbed the phone, reading rapidly. 3 other foreign nurses, 2 from the Philippines and 1 from Vietnam, had filed a joint lawsuit against Busan University Hospital. They claimed systemic discrimination, hostile work environment, and unfair treatment. Their complaints were eerily similar to what Amara had experienced. The hospital's defense? That they'd all brought their problems on themselves, just like Nurse King. "They're using you as their example," Minji said. "As proof that foreign workers cause problems." "But Appa, everyone knows that's bullshit. Everyone knows the hospital targeted you too. Why are you showing us this?" Amara asked. Minji looked at her for the first time, really looked at her. "Because I was wrong. We were all wrong. I let Mom and Dad dictate how I felt about your relationship without thinking for myself. And I'm ashamed. But more than that." She took a deep breath. "I think you could help these nurses. And maybe they could help you." It took 3 meetings and a lot of coffee, but eventually Amara and Jinwoo connected with the 3 nurses and their lawyer. The lawyer, a human rights advocate named Kim Soo-jin, was passionate about immigrant workers' rights. "Your case is perfect," Soo-jin said at their first meeting. "High profile, well documented, clearly discriminatory. If you join this lawsuit, you'll strengthen the others' claims and we can strengthen yours." "I don't want more publicity," Amara said immediately. "We've had enough." "I know," Soo-jin said gently. Jinwoo pulled out a business card that had been sitting in his wallet for months. Someone had given it to him after one of his speaking events, a man named James Chin who worked in global marketing. He said if we ever wanted to tell our story in a different way, he could help, Jinwoo said. Something about how our experience could be valuable in the global marketplace. Amara was skeptical, but they had nothing to lose. James Chin met them at a Starbucks in Haeundae, well-dressed and energetic, speaking English with an American accent. "Your story is gold," he said without preamble. "And I don't mean that exploitatively. I mean that genuine human connection, overcoming adversity, standing up for what's right, that resonates globally. Especially now, when people are hungry for authenticity." "We're not trying to be influencers," Jinwoo said carefully. "I'm not talking about influencers," James said. "I'm talking about building a brand around authentic storytelling. You've already got the foundation, you're articulate, you're compelling, you've got a story people care about. Now we package that into something valuable." "Like what?" Amara asked. "Motivational speaking, corporate consulting on workplace diversity, maybe a podcast about interracial relationships and cultural navigation. Companies will pay serious money for that kind of content, especially international companies trying to crack Asian markets or Asian companies trying to expand globally." They were doubtful, but James was persuasive. "Look, you've got 2 choices. You can take your settlement money, try to restart your medical careers somewhere that will take you, and spend the rest of your lives wondering, what if? Or you can take a risk on something completely different." That night, Amara and Jinwoo talked until dawn. "I loved being a nurse," Amara said. "But honestly, I'm not sure I can go back to healthcare. Every time I think about hospitals, I feel sick." Jinwoo nodded. "Same with medicine. The politics, the hierarchy, the way they destroyed us for loving each other. I don't know if I want to be part of that world anymore. So we do this? We try something completely new." "We try something completely new," Jinwoo agreed. The first year was experimental and terrifying. They used $50 million one of their settlement to hire James as their manager and start an LLC. Park and Kang Global, a consulting and content company focused on cross-cultural communication and workplace equity. Their first client was a small Seoul-based tech company trying to expand into African markets. They paid $5 million for a 3-day workshop on cultural sensitivity and navigation. Jinwoo and Amara taught them about communication styles, business etiquette, common pitfalls. The workshop was successful enough that the company referred them to 2 other companies. Then a Korean skincare brand hired them to consult on marketing to Black consumers. They charged 15 million won and helped the company avoid several disastrous campaigns that would have relied on stereotypes. Slowly, word spread. The scandalous interracial couple had become the go-to experts on cross-cultural business. They started a podcast called Lost in Translation, weekly episodes discussing cultural differences, relationship dynamics, and navigating discrimination. Within 6 months, they had 100,000 listeners. Within a year, they had corporate sponsors. Amara discovered she had a talent for public speaking. She gave a TEDx talk in Seoul about overcoming discrimination that went viral, garnering 5 million views. Companies started booking her for keynote speeches at 20 million won per event. Jinwoo's analytical mind, trained by years of medical research, made him excellent at creating training programs. He developed a corporate diversity curriculum that international companies started licensing. The licensing fees alone brought in 80 million won in year 2. But the real breakthrough came when they were approached by a global pharmaceutical company. The company had offices in 60 countries and was struggling with internal cultural conflicts and discrimination lawsuits. They'd heard about Park and Kang Global and wanted to hire them to overhaul their entire diversity and inclusion strategy. The contract was for 800 million won over 2 years. Amara and Jinwoo sat in James's new office. They could afford a real office now, staring at the contract. "This is more than I made in 5 years as a nurse," Amara said quietly. "This is more than I made in 4 years as a doctor," Jinwoo added. "This is just the beginning," James said, grinning. "You've got something nobody else has: lived experience, credibility, and a story that resonates. Companies are desperate for this kind of authentic guidance." They signed the contract. Year 3 was when everything exploded. The pharmaceutical company's diversity transformation was so successful that they became a case study. Harvard Business Review wrote about them. Other Fortune 500 companies took notice. Park and Kang Global suddenly had a waiting list of corporate clients. They hired a team of 10 consultants. They opened offices in Seoul, Singapore, and eventually Los Angeles. They started licensing their training programs to universities. Amara published a book, Healing Through Resilience: One Nurse's Journey from Scandal to Success. It became an international bestseller, translated into 15 languages. The speaking fees for her book tour alone totaled 400 million won. Jinwoo launched an online platform called Bridge Builders, subscription-based cultural competency training for healthcare professionals. Within 6 months, they had 50,000 subscribers paying monthly fees. The recurring revenue was staggering. But the real money came from their investment in a Korean startup that used AI for language translation. They'd been early advisors and took 5% equity instead of cash. When the company was acquired by Google for 200 billion won, their share was worth 10 billion won. 10 billion won. Roughly $8 million US. They were, by any definition, wealthy. 3 years after losing their medical licenses, Jinwoo and Amara stood on the balcony of their penthouse apartment in Marine City, watching the sun set over Gwangali Beach. They'd bought the apartment outright, no mortgage, no debt. Their company was valued at over 50 billion won. They had more money than they'd ever dreamed of making in medicine. "Do you miss it?" Amara asked. "Medicine?" Jinwoo thought for a long moment. "Sometimes I miss the feeling of saving someone's life. That rush of adrenaline after a successful surgery. But then I think about the politics, the hierarchy, the way they treated us." He shook his head. "No, I don't miss it enough to go back." "Me neither," Amara admitted. "I love nursing, but I love this more. We're helping people in a different way. And we're doing it on our own terms." Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother in Cameroon. "I'm sorry I told you to come home. I'm sorry I didn't believe in your love. You were right, Amara. About everything. I'm proud of you." Amara showed Jinwoo the message, tears in her eyes. "It took her 3 years, but better late than never," Jinwoo said, pulling her close. His phone rang. His father. They'd been speaking again, tentatively, For the past 6 months. His mother still refused, but his father had slowly come around. Appa, Jinwoo answered. I saw your interview on KBS, his father said, his voice gruff. You looked good. Professional. Thank you. There was a long pause. Then, I was wrong. About her. About you. About everything. Jinwoo's eyes filled. I know. Your mother will come around eventually. She's stubborn, but she's watching your success. She's proud, I think. Even if she won't say it. After they hung up, Jinwoo and Amara stood together watching the waves, thinking about how far they'd come. We should do something, Amara said suddenly. Something meaningful with all this money. Like what? A foundation. For foreign workers in Korea facing discrimination. Provide legal support, job training, advocacy. Jinwoo smiled. The Park King Foundation for Workplace Equity. Perfect. They planned it out that night, sitting on their balcony with notebooks and wine. They'd start with 2 billion won in funding. Hire lawyers, counselors, job placement specialists. Create a real support system for people going through what they'd endured. The foundation launched 6 months later with a gala event at the Busan Exhibition and Convention Center. 500 guests attended, business leaders, diplomats, activists, media. Amara and Jinwoo stood on stage together, telling their story one more time, but this time from a position of power and purpose. 3 years ago, we lost everything, Amara said to the crowd. Our careers, our reputations, our financial security. We were told we were a scandal. That our love was unprofessional. That we should be ashamed. But we refused to be ashamed, Jinwoo continued. We refused to let discrimination define us. We refuse to let other people's prejudice destroy our future. And now, Amara said, her voice strong, we're here to make sure nobody else has to go through what we did. The Park King Foundation will provide free legal support, job placement services, and advocacy for foreign workers facing discrimination in Korea. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, as they mingled with guests, a young Filipino nurse approached them nervously. I just wanted to say thank you, she said in accented English. I saw your story 3 years ago when I was thinking about leaving Korea. I stayed because you made me believe things could get better. And now I'm getting my master's degree and I'm not afraid anymore. Amara hugged her, fighting tears. That's exactly why we're doing this. As the evening wound down, they found themselves alone for a moment in a quiet corridor. Can you believe this? Jinwoo asked. 3 years ago, we were scrubbing toilets and working at PC bangs. Now we're at a gala for our own foundation. It feels surreal, Amara admitted. Like it happened to someone else. Do you think we would have built all this if the scandal never happened? Jinwoo asked. If they'd just let us be happy in our medical careers? Amara considered the question seriously. Honestly? Probably not. We'd have been comfortable. Safe. We'd have gotten married quietly, dealt with some discrimination, but never challenged the system. We'd have spent our lives fitting in. So in a twisted way, they did us a favor. I wouldn't go that far, Amara said wryly. But I will say this. They tried to destroy us, and instead they freed us. They tried to make us small, and instead we became impossible to ignore. Jinwoo kissed her forehead. We became billionaires out of spite. Amara laughed. The best revenge is success. And honey, we're very successful. On their way out, they passed the hospital. Busan University Hospital lit up against the night sky. The place where their lives had fallen apart. The place where they'd been judged, humiliated, destroyed. Want to stop? Jinwoo asked. Why? I don't know. Closure, maybe. They stood across the street, looking at the building. Through the windows, they could see doctors and nurses moving through hallways, caring for patients, living the lives Jinwoo and Amara had once lived. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd just broken up when they told us to? Amara asked. All the time, Jinwoo admitted. But then I remember that the version of me who would have given you up isn't someone I want to be. Me neither, Amara said. I'd rather be broke and with you than successful and without you. Good thing we're successful and together, Jinwoo said. They stood there a moment longer, then turned away from the hospital. Toward their car. Toward their home. Toward their future. Behind them, the hospital continued its work, oblivious to the two people it had tried so hard to erase. But Jinwoo and Amara were no longer erasable. They were permanent. Powerful. Proof that love and resilience could overcome even the cruelest prejudice. 3 years ago, they'd been a scandal. Now, they were an empire. And they'd built it together.